Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the Reptile Barn. I want to talk to you guys about something that I talk with my customers a lot about. So, I want to show you the difference between a snake that I just reach in and pick up and a snake that I'm gonna maybe use some caution with before I just reach right in and pick it up. And why the difference might be in the mentality of the snake itself, what the kind of technique, if you will, is even doing, why it changes things. Because what happens a lot is, and not just with customers, just people in the community who want to keep a snake or who already have a snake will call me and be like, my snake is so aggressive. I want to keep it. I like having a snake, but I can't pick it up. Every time I open the cage, I get bit. And I'm like, okay. So, in my understanding, there really are very few snakes that scientifically might be called aggressive. And they're usually going to be large, venomous species. A king cobra, black mamba, because they live in an environment where aggression serves them well. They want other animals to be like, I see a king cobra, I'm not even going over there, right? And they're so big and their venom is so potent that aggression works really well. But for the vast majority of snakes, biting is for two purposes only. It's a food strike, right? They think there might be food, and so you're opening the enclosure and they're just lunging, thinking that food might be there. Or two, they're defensive. They're afraid, right? And in my opinion, it's actually easier to deal with fear in a snake than aggression would be. Now, I have no experience with venomous snakes. I probably never will. But I believe that there are things people in the reptile hobby specifically have figured out that can really help overcome fear in a snake. So first, let me show you a typical ball python. Oh, and she just shed, so she's beautiful and perfect. I reach in, I pick her up. That's that. All right? Now, I kind of glanced at her for a second, because if she had been like reared up, keyed in, ready to strike, like maybe she thought there was food, then I would have been a little more cautious. But I haven't been thawing out any rats. I don't have any live rodents in here right now, so there's just no trigger for her to think that there might be food. And I know my collection because I hold these snakes a lot, right? So I just reach in and pick it up, right? And 99% of my ball pythons, or anyone else's ball pythons I've ever held, I do the same thing. Now, there are probably breeders with like a high number of snakes that don't ever hold their snakes. I'm not passing a judgment, but I do think those snakes are going to be a little less socialized, right? And maybe that's not going to be the case even for ball pythons, which are so docile by nature. But for my ball pythons, I'm going to give them just the quickest of glances. And if they're chill, which they almost always are, I'm just going to reach in and pick them up. Okay? So it can be that easy. And that's what everybody wants with any of their pets 100% of the time, right? But that's just not going to be the case with some of your animals. So let me put her back and show you a little bit different of a scenario, okay? Okay. So other than the ball pythons, the only other snakes I keep in a rack are my Savu pythons, okay? And before I get into this, I take no credit for anything I know about Savu pythons. I'm going to do an entire video just on Savu pythons very soon. In fact, I'm already working on it. But all this information comes from Gary at GS Reptiles. He is worlds ahead of me, certainly, and I think probably ahead of anyone else on how to keep and even breed Savu pythons. So just keep that in mind. This is not because I know so much. This is just because Gary has been awesome about always answering my questions, even years after buying these snakes. Like, I shot him an email a couple weeks ago. He emailed right back. Super, super helpful. responsible breeder. Could not recommend him more. And his YouTube channel is hilarious. But I want to show you the difference between the ball pythons and the Savu pythons. Okay? I can already tell you, just from me being here, waving my hands around, she's right up at the front. Or she was for a minute. I don't know if she still is. But she always comes up and checks. When she sees movement right outside her tub, she immediately zooms up to check because she wants food. Okay? And she's a little defensive. Now, I have never once been bitten by this snake, even though many of the people who call me about their snake they think is aggressive would definitely get bitten by this snake. So let me just open it up and you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to back up a little bit because I don't want to get bit. I'm going to open it with my hook. That's not probably totally necessary, but sometimes she comes lunging. Oh, look how beautiful she is. Okay, so let me make sure you can see this. Oh, yeah, you totally can. If you're going to use a hook, make sure it's one with a rubberized end so that if they bite it, they're not going to hurt their teeth, okay? Now, if I were to just reach in there like I did with the ball python, she's going to bite me. I promise. But she's not a mean snake. And I like to hold my snakes. And once she's out, she's delightful. Very sweet animal. So I give her a minute. I just sit here, literally sit here. She watches. She can't smell food. She can't see food. She can't hear food. If they listen for their food, I'm not sure if that's a snake behavior. But I'm just giving her a second. And now I'm going to show her the hook. If she's still crazy, she might bite it, but usually she doesn't. I'm not even touching her with it. I'm just showing it to her, and she's starting to retreat already because she realizes there's not food. Okay? Now I'm going to open her up a little further. And let me see if I can get you guys in a position to see better. Bend it down a bit. In fact, tell you what. Raise it up and then point it down so you can see the best. How about that? There we go. So, at this point, Gary just reaches in quickly and picks him up. And if he gets bit one time, he doesn't care. I do care, so I don't do that. But he has said, you can just, at this point, if you're very quick, just reach in and pick him up. And that's what he does. Or sometimes he'll take like a lid or something, kind of put over their head, and then he'll pick them up from behind. Because once they're up, they're great. I tend to just pick them up with the hook and then transfer them to my hand. I feel like that's one extra step to even minimize the possibility of getting bit, just because I don't want to get bit. Gary doesn't care. He keeps much bitier snakes than Savu pythons. So now that she's up, I just let her slither for a minute, and I'm going to try and get back in the frame, and then I'll be holding her. Hey, good girl. Again, this is a very nice snake. She's got a great temperament. She's beautiful. She's calm. She's curious. There's everything you would want in a handling experience with a snake, right? Get back in frame here. I just had to give her a second and use a method that isn't so similar maybe to when she's fed, right? Which is I open her tank and I immediately put in tongs holding food. So she strikes. I give her a second to think. I then have a different tool that looks and feels and smells nothing like her feeding tongs. I show that to her, and she has realized that this means it's just playtime, right? And I've never been bitten, ever, by her. Even though often when I open her up, she's ready to strike. But I mean, if you're willing to take 60 extra seconds and find a different tool, some people just use a paper towel roll because, again, it's soft. It's not going to hurt their teeth if they bite it. And now she's awesome. She's great. I let my kids hold her. I let some guests hold her, and she has never given me a single ounce of trouble. So, doesn't mean she couldn't. Every creature can have a bad day. I'm not trying to say this is a 1000% guarantee, but for a snake that if I were doing this a different way would bite me every single time, to instead have never bitten me a single time, I just really think that this is worth thinking about for any snake keeper, right? And I can do this video again for lizards because I think that their behavior might be a little different, but the concept stands. Get food out of their head, give them a little bit of time, try and find something that they don't feel so threatened by, and they're usually gonna be okay. Um, this one certainly is. My retics are this way. My super dwarf retics, they have never bitten me ever, but they're very, very food motivated. And while the female isn't defensive at all, the male is. So instead of just reaching in like I would with a ball python, I give them some time. I let them think. I show them a different tool, and then I pick them up with the hook and transfer them to my hand, and they're great. Um, so I just really think the snake is happier this way. She doesn't feel threatened. She doesn't feel like she has to defend herself every time I want to get her out. She's not going to hurt her teeth biting something hard. I'm not going to get bitten. Who wants to get bit? I mean, I guess there's some weirdos who, well, no, I guess there's people who do it for views, right? But typically, no one wants to get bit. And then I have this awesome interaction with my pet snake, and I put her back. She's happy. I really think that more people should be willing to show you how to not get bit, because a lot of people on YouTube show you how getting bit isn't really a big deal, which I think is super valuable. I'm glad they do that, but how to not get bit is important because I feel like it's also for the happiness of your snake. This is not a wild animal anymore. It has a wild nature because it's not been domesticated, but it lives in captivity. And there should be benefits and perks to living in captivity, right? Like, you're not in danger. You're not going to starve. You're not going to get horrible weather that's burning you or flooding you out or whatever. There should be benefits. And an animal that is calm and docile and trusting is clearly living those benefits, right? So I'll leave it at that. I hope that this was informational to some of you. I really, really feel like people should be able to enjoy their reptiles. Now, some people's enjoyment primarily comes from having a display animal with a big, gorgeous, beautiful vivarium. Fantastic. That's wonderful. But for those of you who like to handle your snakes, it should not have to be such a traumatizing experience for your skin and for the snake. Now, are there snakes out there that are far, far more defensive than this individual? Of course. And I could maybe do this video again with the white lip pythons to show you that even then, there's things you can do. They're very defensive. But for the majority of the pet snakes in the trade that are captive bred, so, you know, your typical boas, pythons, corn snakes, king snakes even. King snakes can be very food crazed and don't seem to get over that sometimes. But for the most part, most snakes can be like this, okay? That's all I really wanted to get at. And I'm happy to discuss this further, other theories, other techniques. I'm always happy to talk about these in the comments, or if you email me or whatever the case may be, right? So that is that. I'm going to go ahead and put her back. And thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, we are the Reptile Barn.